for you right now?
It is midnight.
Okay, same time. Okay.
Yeah. So
So
Oh,
that's
we're
great.
you're in Poland now, or you're in UK?
Yes, I'm in Poland now. Yes,
Okay.
correct.
Nice, nice,
So it's 9 a.m. for me in the morning.
yes,
nice.
I got lucky. I said to I can't remember. I think it was I can't remember who it was yesterday. I was like, I'm gonna just wake up at 6:30 just to like figure things out. And then I realized I was in England. It was one hour behind. I mean,
Oh yeah.
and I was like, oh, that was good.
We are live.
Yes, we are. Hello. Yeah, hello everyone. Let us know if you can hear us all right, but glad to see everyone again. This is actually one of the last events of Dora Expo. It'll be one of the last panel discussions. Our last event is a special talk. So yeah, this is pretty special, and I'm already feeling a little bit sad that it's coming to an end, but I'm excited for this particular discussion. Hello. Yeah, let us know if you can hear us in the chat.
Hello, hello.
Hey guys.
25
Okay.
people. All right. Hello, Megs, Elizabeth, all the lovely people.
Mhm. Great to see someone coming from humid Saigon. Hello. West Coast. Same here. Hi, Irene. It's good to see you again. Um, Alrighty. I I think I can definitely kick this off by just I mean, we can just get right into it, yeah. So, hi everyone again, and welcome to this
Hey.
of Dora Expo, Web Design in the AI Era, where we'll be covering the future of no-code tools for a creative industry disrupted and evolving by rapid developments in AI and most recently MR as well. I'm Isa, your host for Dora Expo, and I'm just so excited to welcome our wonderful panelists today, each with equally impressive backgrounds in teaching, in utilizing and building communities around no-code tools. So allow me to provide a brief introduction about myself. I am the head of community at Dora. You may know us as the No Code 3D website builder that brought you Dora AI. And that is a text to website AI tool that combines sort of the capabilities of generative AI with no code tools. So you can bet that I'm number one, just really motivated about the promises of no code. Part of Dora's inception really came from this need to address communication latencies, right? And a desire to unite designers and developers and just various members of a team to work on a common interface. Um, and secondly, of course, is, I'm just really excited to tackle today the challenge of navigating some of the constraints and limitations of programming logic within a no-code. Um, like in addition to those promises, right? The opportunities that we're looking at. So, you know, without further ado, let's delve into the fascinating world of rapid application development. So, and let's welcome our lovely panelists. And just to get to know y'all a little better, would love to start by popcorning over to maybe Josh. And feel free to tell us a little about yourself and what experiences you've had using no-code tools, either for building websites or applications. Yeah, go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Josh Lowe. I am recently been known to kick off this crazy esports for web design, and I was the head of community at Reloom. So Reloom is the world's largest component library. They build it on for Webflow. It's a website building tool, and for Figma as well. So a fun fact about me, I actually came from a civil engineering background, and about 4 years ago, I switched over into tech. So my transition to this whole tech space was because of the possibility of no code tools. So I've just kind of built my career just doing freelance work, building websites on Webflow, and then using automation tools and Zapier and WhaleSync and things like that. And so I was able to build a huge e-commerce website, which kept me afloat during the pandemic. So really owe it to the no code tools. I don't know how to code. And that's just a great bridge. And since then, I've learned all about like low code things. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
Thanks for introducing yourself, Josh. And it's pretty interesting to hear that you quickly made it clear that you're not exactly an expert in coding, but still you managed to build such an incredible community. And I'm just really excited to delve into sort of what you mentioned about low code as well. Mm-hmm. But before we do that, I'd love to pass the mic over to Filip.
Sure, absolutely. Hey, everyone. My name is Filip Grebowski, or otherwise known as Developer Filip from YouTube. I'm a tech YouTuber or content creator. I'm also a developer advocate for a tech startup called Permit.io. And I'm also that guy who beat Apple to making an Apple Music player, which ended up getting us a worldwide recognition. Apple saw it, and they actually ended up inviting us to their main headquarters in California. So that was really fun and an exciting part of my journey. I am actually by trade a computer scientist. I was leading a team at Cisco to engineer and design the internal developer dashboards. And since then, I essentially ended up combining my two passions, which was videography and coding, and taking that to the next level. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. And I'm really tempted to follow up on what you meant by the Apple Music player, but I'm going to pass it to Vincent. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Vince. I run No Code Family, which is a platform where we help founders to find the right no-code tools powered by AI. Actually, my background is quite different from those guys. I was product in large corporations running, quite advanced tech, but with 15 engineers. So it was much more around building products, but figuring out the user need, and then working with engineering teams. So I had some understanding, but never really could have the hard skill to build anything. And that's when I, stumbled upon no code. And at the time, I got lucky. I got into something that is one of those tools that is a bit more advanced, Bubble. And it was 7 years ago. And since then, all of these tools came up, and way more of them. There's Dora, obviously, as well. And kind of in the same approach as Josh, I went more into low code. And now I also help people to build with AI. So specifically, my channel Build with Vince is very new, but it's the idea of being able to build any product, and any of these products that you build has a piece of AI somewhere. And I was actually at some point, one of the things that went a bit viral is BekindBuddy.com, which was the AI for good platform using ChatGPT. It was the first one, but that was just a fun project.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for introducing yourself, Vince. And I actually kind of wanted to, since we have this vocabulary popping up, I thought it might be a good idea to sort of clarify quickly sort of the main differences between no code and low code to those who might not be super familiar with those terms.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to kind of take that away and give a very short and brief explanation. So anything that is no code means that all the technology that's behind the specific product that you might be using, that technology needs to be abstracted away from the complexity that a user might be facing. And therefore, that user is presented with a very beautiful UI to essentially manage all of that and build something, whether it is, for example, using a website like Dora, or generate something, or give inputs to the UI for it to produce an outcome so that they can produce their final result and product, just in a very abstract way. And then you've got the difference of low code, which is essentially providing very abstract code snippets, like the building blocks essentially of the product you're working with, where you can embed that piece of code into your software somewhere and have that product function along with it. And I'm sure the guys can add a little bit more on top of that basic explanation.
Yeah, I mean, go for it.
That's perfect. I can't add more to that. I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I agree. I would just add there's something that I tend to talk about, but it's not really talk, is zero code. So like almost zero code, no code, and low code. And for me, the zero code is the kind of card. It's kind of like just a templatized, and you're never going to change anything. You're just launching something versus. I think it helps people understand the difference between what no code can do versus like really zero code. But it's really like no code. But it's just like there's complexity that you can add. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And this kind of brings me to something I've been thinking about for a while, but and this is something that I remember, Vince, you mentioned that you wanted to clarify, but I sort of have this question about whether or not the definition of no code has actually been changing or if it's having different implications. So I'm curious if y'all have any ideas about how no code products today compare to maybe those that we might have seen maybe 10 something years ago. Yeah, like I guess what is the trend we're observing right now with the way no code products are becoming? Sorry, I'm trying to find my language right now.
Good.
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
To be honest, I feel like I'm still a rookie. Like I give myself a self-appointed name of no code nobody because I really start from I'm just a nobody just joining in, and I'm like new to the scene. But obviously what I'm seeing now, I mean, along with every program out there, is this layer of AI. And I think that's is like the next generation of no code. But to me, really, it's just no code tools like now, like currently AI came. It's just like using a GUI or like a visual, visualizer just to build and have the code like run in the back end. So yeah, to me, like it's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think when we're comparing the transition, I think that what we mean by the transition is that previously there weren't many no-code tools. The phrase no-code didn't really exist, I think, at that point in time. It's something that has become very apparent lately that people are starting to recognize. And I think the transition that we're starting to see here is that more and more companies are adopting no-code, and more companies are adding features or completely changing the way they work to offer that no-code solution. And I think that the basic principle of that is, and the really important concept is that the adoption of the product, so how many people can actually use it, becomes much larger. You're essentially giving opportunities to people and allowing them to do things that maybe they couldn't or weren't able to do, maybe something that took a really long time to do. And now they're able to, sit down, learn this tool, learn how to use it, and produce a piece of work that's absolutely immaculate. And I think that's really, really awesome, and something that we're seeing, a lot of companies take on, so that people can, in a much easier way, use what they're building, essentially, and give a larger variety of people the access to that.
Yeah, I think to develop with numbers on top of what the guys have said, the market has doubled since COVID. It was around 60 billion. Now it's around the 30 plus. And by the end of 2028, it'll be like 130, 150 billion. So it's definitely...
Wow.
Yeah, the size is definitely big. When I speak to devs around no code, the reason they don't really believe it, I feel like, is because there's so many tools that were no code 10 years ago for devs, right? And the adoption wasn't there. And so there's also that, no code always existed, but it didn't work, so it's not going to work this time around. But I feel people who are building them are way more customer-centric, problem-centric than dev-centered in a way.
I'll give you a really interesting engineering perspective from what you said, because some time back, engineers are quite like, I like my code, so I'm not going to dive into all these tools that are being thrown at me. And some time back, people were very strict on, I want to write this code and I want it to work and I want to see it do this, and like I need the satisfaction of doing that. So when someone came along and said, oh yeah, you don't actually have to do that anymore, they were like, but why are you taking that away from me? But now I think as we talk more about it and we make people aware how beneficial it is and how awesome and how much more time efficient it is. And I think that's really important, because it really minimizes that, if you're focusing on a specific thing that you're building within your company, well, clearly you're not going to dedicate your time to like building like a piece of software. You might as well use something that's like no code already, do it really quickly and focus on the actual on the actual important things that you want to build and deliver and what your company focuses on. So I think that there is that engineering shift that we're seeing as well, where they're like more and happy to do this. And now we're getting to the point where, AI is getting implemented into no-code tools, and suddenly engineers are like, yes, this is what I want.
You know what a good analogy is switching from like doing mathematics on pen and paper, right, and going through the proofs and stuff like that, making that shift over to using a calculator. Where the calculator, again, it's just the buttons, has those user interfaces, but when you press, I don't know, this cosine that or whatever using like trigonometry, the calculation goes in the back end. And so I think it's just that mental shift, that paradigm shift of like going from manual calculations, or in this case, like syntax and writing code, to just an easier graphical interface where you can just really do what you really want to do at the end of the day. So and then I feel like now with AI, it's like the jump from a calculator to the smartphone.
Yeah, that's a great analogy, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like that we're kind of already touching on the way we're observing no-code tools altering the design to development workflow, or just our own workflows in general. And I guess that kind of begs the question, I'm sure a lot of people are asking this, right? Because how does that transfer, or how does that affect our own value, right? As designers, as developers, and how does that actually influence the kind of skills or tools that we ourselves need to learn and utilize?
Oh man, that's such a packed question.
It's a good one.
I don't know. I feel like it's really narrowing the gap between the designer and developer, where honestly, that is in any project or big team, the amount of time spent coordinating, communicating back and forth, where the designer says, okay, it should be, and they have the vision of, again, I think another good analogy is like from an architect to an actual contractor and builder, right? So the architect has an idea of how the house should be, but the time it takes to go back and forth is so long. So if you can both become the designer and developer using no code tools, it just gets rid of that gap. And so ultimately it will save the client and the project lots of money. And at the end of the day, it's all about bringing and increasing more efficiency.
And I think it kind of also impacts the way the team works together in that way. Because I remember when I was still at Cisco, it's a very corporate company, the design team, even though we were kind of working together, it was a whole separate team. Like you never really spoke to them. You never really saw them. It was just like you got the information and you had to put it into practice. And I think when you're sharing tools, and I think this is what kind of you are trying to aim for, when you're starting to share these tools, you're starting to also get that better communication. So then, you can actually interact with other team members from other sectors and really kind of, it makes your work more fun. And I think getting that exposure to more things is also quite nice.
Yeah, I think some of the things that I've seen from even product management with engineering team using Scrum or Kanban approach, you have to throw this away completely at the window. True. Every single person that I know, where agencies as well, the way they have to work with no code. Well, there's a couple of differences, right? You can't have just a dev that's doing front end and back end. A lot of these things are with no code. it's all full stack at once. You're designing the front as much as the database. So first, that already is not something you can split out between people. And the speed, and we wrote something with obviously AI at some point around this, which was the speed that we have to go is almost taking so long to create the user stories and figure out like what you need to build than actually building it. So there's always that sweet spot of like, well, you can't just like, apart if you're amazingly good at Dora or Webflow or any of these platforms, your design still need to be built in Figma, and almost like using Figma first is like longer than but the value of having that if you want to design. But I think as well, the design to development in a general aspect, I think it's within businesses, it will massively change the way that these, product are built, where instead of having a product manager, your stakeholders, the developers, etc., you split everything out. And then now the business unit's owner or the guy who actually needs that product can just build it themselves. The challenge with that is IT shadow. I don't know if people have heard about this, but it's like the idea of you're building a lot of technology where the technology infrastructure, so like CTOs and that org doesn't know it's happening. So there's a lot of issue around security and, legacy data. But in general, I would say it is empowering product and business people rather than being dependent on the tech team, where they're like, oh, we don't have space, we don't have time to build these things for you.
So I have a follow-up question to both of you guys. What do you guys think of using multiple no-code tools as part of building one project?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it depends. It could be a Frankenstein project, right? But nowadays, I mean, I just met an agency that, they specialize in like consulting and just creating all these no-code stacks. Like a CMS or a website builder, and then a backend, or like using Xano or using Make or Zapier to integrate it and automate that. I think, it's very doable. I feel like it's maturing pretty well now. It just depends on if it's enterprise level and like the amount of data. But if it's like a local mom and pop store, for sure, I think it's totally doable.
Yeah,
sounds good.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it. Go for it. I just approved.
Gosh, I'd love for you to send that agency to me. There's not a lot of. It's very hard to do. I've actually done this before. The challenge with it, right? It comes with the idea of if every single tool is a language in development, so you suddenly have to have a lot of understanding and a lot of knowledge and expertise in all these tools. However, I am 100% like, I do not have any project that doesn't have a full like multi-stack no-code tools and low-code. The reason as well for it is your reduce vendor lock-in and issues, right? So for example, the way I always think about this is like database, front end, and workflow automation. So for example, database, Superbase or Airtable, or however the complexity you want. Front end could be Dora, Webflow, Bubble, WeWeb, all these tools. And in the middle, you would have Mike and depending on how your hard skills, right? Or Zapier, for example. And you have all the tools and all complexity. But for me, it makes sense. Another thing that I would say is if you're building an entire business or tech around all of these tools, if you have each business units should have their own stack as well, right? It's like, well, maybe the core is dev completely, but then should you still be hard coding automation emails, or should that be done by someone else? I'm like, why are you spending like 2 weeks building a whole email system when there's tools to do that, So
okay, so I think this is like no code is like the gateway drug into full code, right? Because when you start combining all these stacks, there are limitations to some. And so, okay, here's some free free advertising here. So Stack Digital, just talking to Brandon, and they just they consolidate. And this is also a great opportunity with like platforms or the evolution of technology. It opens up new jobs. And so like you can go consulting into offering different different stacks. So yeah, it's very interesting how things are evolving for sure.
So the company I work for is actually a perfect example of how no code turns to like full code in some way or another, because we as a startup, we develop a no code tool for like writing authorization, so checking who has access to what. But then again, to release our whole platform, we use authentication providers like Auth0 for logging in, and that's a no code. We use Stripe for payments, which is also no code that we just embed. We use like Zapier and other things for automation of all the other tasks that we have. And then we use like all analytic platforms to just embed no code, for example, and get all the information. So you can see it's like little puzzles that like fit together to make something bigger. So yes, there's just an example for you of something that that also requires many no code tools and can work together well.
Would you say the kind of foundational connector for all these no-code tools is really like just the APIs, just learning APIs and how they all connect? Because a lot of these stacks just take advantage of other APIs, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It will either be either the platform will already have an integration for those two things working together, so you might not have to learn anything, or it's just learning that API level, being able to know how to call that API to use the system, or but at this point it's not really even that. It's almost, if you're getting to some code, it's the company going to offer low code. Like, for example, Stripe gives you like an embeddable component. We at Permit, we also give you an embeddable component that you just like paste a code snippet in and it just works out of the box. Same thing with like any authentication service. They just give you embeddable like snippet, you paste it in. Here, actually, you might have to do some, configurations if you want like extra settings, I guess, right? If you want some like extra functionality, you might have to add on top of it. Then in that case, you would have to. But it's not the case anymore where you have to design everything from scratch and build everything from scratch and literally pull your hair out because you don't know how to fix an issue. It's not going to be the case anymore. So yes, absolutely.
And to follow up on that question, Josh, as well, and what Filip just said, I'd say thanks to the market being so big now and so much more tools, if one tool doesn't provide it, another one will. So it's quite interesting to see you can go the custom API way, which still I think for a lot of people is not accessible. Or you can be like, oh, I can't do this with this tool, but does it connect with Zapier? And does Zapier connect to this? It becomes a bit more complex, but at least you're able to do something that you wouldn't have been able to do. And it's like you might have a Zapier thing, and you might have a Make, because Make has a different setup. And we were trying at some point to do something similar, because they didn't want custom APIs, even though it's quite fair, like straightforward. And actually, you can. Like, you just need to find the right tool that does it, and there's always one of them that does it. It's quite interesting. The cost is obviously higher, but it's still cheaper than the dev.
So I'll add on to this one more. Like, I feel like once you're into the automation world, like Zapier, Make, and then you're connecting like fields, whether it's email fields or images or whatever, and then you connect to databases, to Airtable, it's a totally different skill set and mindset. I feel like now you're no longer a like designer, or I don't know if this is development, like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this is more like, I don't know, it's like systems design, right? Like you're just plugging in, playing, systems architecture, data architecture. For me, I love it. It's like super nerdy, but it's
without any worry of anything being down or of anything not working as it's supposed to, because it's just maintained by someone else, so you don't have to have to have that worry. And in general, from both of what you guys said, I absolutely love the principle, because I'm a big advocate for having and enabling people who don't have the skill set or haven't learned the skill set to be able to do really cool things, because that's what we essentially all strive for. So whenever I showcase, for example, my YouTube, like the portfolios, like amazing portfolios, and I shine the spotlight on those devs, it was always a thing in the back of my head where I was like, well, I'm going to show this, but like, how many of my audience will be able to implement this? And then at one point, that's kind of where I found myself here is when Dora came, and I was like, well, listen, guys, like now you've got this tool, you can actually do it. And I think with any kind of space in tech, we're seeing those tools come out. And it just makes me really happy because now everyone in the communities that I run is able to do something that's really cool, and something that's impressive as well, and share their work. So it's just another really cool skill set to have.
Yeah, super exciting.
Yeah, this is really bringing us back to a previous discussion we had earlier today. But I mean, we were talking about actually how we're observing this APIification, and that really it might actually come down to, since it seems like a lot of the tools, no-code tools, low-code tools available are going to be actually better geared for empowering individuals to do a lot more, and that we're really essentially whoever is staying on top of that, right? Who can really collect the relevant software, the relevant tools, and create a larger ecosystem where they can sort of create and do things that usually you would require a team to do. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the trend we're looking at. And I guess the question I had posed, and I would like to pose again, is how can we ensure that as people who build tools as well, like how can we generate and just retain value in this sort of new structure that we're observing?
Such great questions, Isa. Wow. I don't know. I think this is really exciting. I feel like we're entering like a new digital renaissance where there's a plethora of tools now, and those who are successful will be those who know how to use different tools. And so I don't know, you just look at like Michelangelo. He was an engineer, he was an artist, he was everything in between. And so I think this is because of the access to tools and technology, it will give rise to all these unique skills. And so then it's really all about, I think it forces us to have higher level thinking and also tackle higher level problems, because especially AI, it's all about, takes care of the execution, and so then we can focus on bigger picture issues and problems, and then which I think gives rise to more discussions or things like that. That's very big and meta, but I do feel like, I guess, how do we be valuable? I think it's just to raise our level of problem solving, I suppose.
Yeah, it's about finding the pinpoints that are specifically hard to understand, take a long time to execute, might just be complex in themselves, and then producing a solution based on that is just easy. And I think that's kind of the principle of all no-code tools. I think from like looking at it from like an end user perspective, if there's someone that is building a no-code tool, I think usually any kind of engineering team, they would put a lot of pressure on making sure that everything runs correctly and that everything is efficient and that everything works as it's supposed to. But here again with no-code, I think the biggest playing factor is the user experience and getting as much feedback for specific parts of the no-code platform. That will essentially give you as much feedback to see how the user is interacting with it, if it's simple enough to understand, if there are any struggles, and build on top of that feedback, because then you can ensure that what you're providing to a user is actually usable, for one, and that the experience of using it is also satisfactory.
Yeah. I mean, Vince, did you want to add on to that?
I think they've covered it very well. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a tough question. And honestly, I think we've already given a lot of interesting advice in terms of the considerations when we're building tools within this ecosystem, right? Because we actually already touched on, how do I phrase this? I believe we were talking about different tools being available at different parts of the design development process. And for example, maybe, and actually I read this recently, but there's a lot of, I think it's a consensus that perhaps no code versus low code, for example, no code might be especially appropriate, considering that it's really just dependent on graphical user interfaces, right? Particularly great for user developing, like user interfaces doing the front end part of it. But then if we're talking about other parts of the design to development process, if we're talking about providing other services, then perhaps low code or other things are more helpful. So I remember, Josh, you actually mentioned that one of the great parts about no-code tools is actually it's educating no-code users to become low-code users. And I was wondering if you wanted to expand on that, because I think that's sort of touching on sort of what we ourselves have to gain.
Yeah, I think that would probably be the next iteration of, like I said, so like no code is like a gateway drug, because as you enjoy it and then you're like, oh, I think I have an idea. I can create my own tool, and this is a gap in the market. So then you start looking into API integrations, and you look into things like CRUD. What is it? I forgot the acronym. Create. Anyways, yeah. REST and like all these different principles, right? Like, yeah, create, delete, update, all that stuff. So and so yeah, you start looking into that. And so I feel like, again, that's a new job and market that'll open up as education in this space. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I like on that. I think depending on the tool you use today, like that was also my experience, right? I started, I could read code-ish. I worked with engineers. I had a high level of understanding because they were explaining to me like what a Kafka stream is. It's like the first time you hear this, you're like, okay. But when you go no code and depending on the tools you use, there are some that really helps you understand and have the engineering mindset, which is the way I can describe it. It's very weird, but it's like the reverse way we humans think about things. So it's not you thinking about the UI or like how you want things to look. It's like the reverse, like you start with the data. Well, we always say around front end is like you don't design the front end, you start with the data first and you're trying to figure out how that would look like. And I think no-code tools, like for example, when you have to figure out the database as well as the front end, you suddenly have to figure that out. And as you do it, you're like, oh, I made a mistake. Let me go back to the database extract. So like people start understanding then when they hire an agency, whether it's no code, low coded code, they can't just go in and be like, oh, every 2 weeks. Oh, by the way, I forgot this, I forgot that. So I think it helps people becoming more sufficient in knowledge of coding or software in general. I think we are going in with AI, we're going to go towards a more technical sound population.
Mm-hmm. I think I can give a nice example of a tool that's been out for a long time that allows people to understand maybe a difficult principle with APIs in a more UI visualized way. And I don't know if you guys heard about Postman. Postman is essentially a UI where you can just put the endpoint. It gives you a drop down for like all the CRUD actions or like all the actions to do with the API. It gives you a whole like UI interface for seeing how you can adjust the headers of an API request. But it's taking a concept that's quite difficult maybe to people that haven't used it before, and it's visualizing it and then showing you the what happens when you send the request and what reply you get, and it gives you a nice kind of human readable format that you can look into. So there is also a bunch of these. I would call it an intermediate tool between kind of a no code, low code, and maybe just having some code to be able to just give that understanding to someone as well. And I think those are growing. So I'm more than certain that at some point Postman will be like, yep, it's some AI and no code right there. It's gonna work perfectly. Use it. It's gonna happen at one point.
Yeah, I love Postman. It's interesting because your background is in dev, right?
Right.
It's interesting because you're aware of this. Like the first time I heard about it, I was like, what the heck is this? And I went in there, I was like, I had no understanding. I was like, what's going on here? it took a while. So they're still quite, I think, towards devs, but I would love to see, because I agree with you. And I think a couple of things they've done really well, the collections that are shared collections. So some companies like now to integrate with them, it's just one click opens up Postman and all your API calls are there, which is very easy to transfer to someone else. Or obviously the integration with curl, like you just copy paste from any kind of API documentation and it just gives you all the data. I love Postman, but there's almost like a click you have to get to move to that. But once you're in, like, I do everything. I agree.
Absolutely. So that's why I think, I think they're realizing this now, and they're going to do something about it, where there is not going to be that moment where you have to click and understand it. You're just going to know. How they do it, I'm curious. Let's see and find out.
I think it's also interesting to bring back to the idea of like what is the alternative right now is like open the terminal.
Yeah.
Right.
Or write some code.
Or write some code and like, yeah. So.
I mean, I love that we're talking about AI in parallel with no code, because it definitely shares that same sentiment of like we're moving towards automating processes, and we're definitely pretty optimistic about that. But I guess a question for y'all is, what opportunities, specific opportunities, right, exist for AI tools to enhance no code platforms? And maybe even consider what threats they actually might pose, because if they're both responsible for automating, are there places where they might compete or replace each other?
That's a very, very interesting question, because I've been toying with AI for a while now, and I'm sure the guys have as well, like most people probably at this point. And I feel like they just they bring opportunities that we never thought that we could have. And at this point, the question is, how is it going to be used to give us things that we never thought we were going to have, that will give us a lot of advantage in how we do things? And I think the biggest impact here is the speed at which we do things. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Just go ahead.
I just want to hear from you, Filip. Sorry, Vincent.
I agree with the speed. I think a lot of tools are. I think I'd rather see tools develop with AI or integrate with AI a bit slower, so it's not gimmicky. Which I think we're seeing a lot of that, to be honest. And there's a lot of problem that it brings as well. But there are, I think, also like, we have AI versus also problem-centered. For example, it's an example around for designers, like you have a Figma file and you just upload it, and it's like, takes that, create the code, but then the code that is related to the platform. So it could be like Webflow, or it could be Dora, or it could be Bubble, right? And the output there works. Now there's a big challenge when you do that, it's too fast. So why is the design system? How do the classes work? All these kind of things, right, which bring a negative part. But I do think the way I see AI with no-code tools are basically bringing code. Like if we think of this, like a no-code tool is just code that is just not drag and drop. So instead of you having to drag and drop, which is time consuming, you would just have it right away, quite fast. And then you could still change it without having to drag and drop. So almost, I feel, if we think 10 years from now, your entire SaaS would be built by just talking to your phone, which we've seen with AutoGPT and things like that, right? As examples where there's no user interface.
I have an interesting theory. I think what AI will be also used for is to give you a faster way of integrating things together, like no-code tools. So you're going to say, hey, I want an app that is based on Webflow and it integrates Stripe and let's say Zapier or something. and then they will be like, okay, let me set it up for you, kind of thing. Or it will just, it will be all in the UI. You'll just tick the right boxes. You'll generate the whole project, and it will just do it for you. But of course, there's going to be some AI behind that, doing some of that work, especially also with things like customization, making things very specific to you. That's a thing that AI will be also good at, especially with any kind of platform, whether it's no code or low code. So I just think, like, for example, the coding snippets to your so personalizing the coding snippets. We already saw in documentation, for example, where they like auto inject API keys, so it's like personal to you. But we're talking about like things like theming, where you have like an element from Stripe and you want to theme it, and it matches. You want it to match your brand. Maybe you can pass the link of your whole website, and we'll just adjust the branding of that element to your website already, right? And it'll just generate that for you. So things like this. There's a lot of cool things that can happen.
I love that. And one example I actually like, I have a problem of when you want suddenly all your images to be rounded by 20 pixel,
right?
The entire site. And right now, the only thing is either you made the right classes, or you have to go in like everywhere and change that. You just like, yeah. Consistency as well. Love it.
I don't know. This is crazy. I think it's yeah, like Filip said, like we don't know how far it'll take us. And it's because of the speed. Like we haven't dealt with the speed of computing and execution before. So it's like, what's the limit? So my question was like, for you guys, what do you guys see as far as you can imagine? What's the glass ceiling now with this layer of AI? Because before that, really the limitation was just the size of the team, right? You had like a team of 50. Maybe half of them were developers, quarter of them, or like 10 of them were like designers and, marketers and stuff like that. But now we're going to see teams where it's probably just like 3 people, and they could be a multi-billion-dollar, company, because AI is taking care of all the execution. So like, yeah, what's that glass ceiling? For me, I feel like, I don't know. I'm thinking about the threats. We could be too dependent on AI. I think we have no idea how it's going to affect us socially. Even the way, again, it's shifting the way we think, because now we're in a more prompt-based thinking. And even, again, that opens up a whole another industry of jobs. It's just like, be a perfect prompt writer, because now, like, AI is like setting you up to describe exactly what you want. But do we even know what we want? And it's one of those things like, well, I'll know it when we see it. It's like, that the typical worst nightmare client. Like, I don't know, like, you tell me, AI. And so, yeah, it's going to change the way we just think and demand. Could make us more demanding than before. So it'll be interesting. Anyway, so to come back to my question, like, what do you guys see as like the glass ceiling as far as you can think, with this layer of AI?
I think the major shift here is, of course, there's the question that always comes up is like, will AI and will like no code affect like our jobs, or like will it be some kind of a threat? But a lot of the people forget that, first of all, the world is changing, so we have to adjust to everything, and we have to learn to work with it and use it to our advantage. That's one thing. The other thing is that some jobs will be gone, but other jobs will be replaced in the sense that there is going to be a much bigger need for people to maintain these AI tools and these no-code tools. And for that, of course, you will need the basic principles as well. So there's going to be a shift of, like, I think, workload, how it works. Yes, of course, I think we're going to see really big businesses, just with a free team, based on a free member team. Absolutely. Speaking about the glass ceiling, I actually don't know. Honestly, like, I really don't know. Like, time will tell, I think. It's so hard to see how things are going to shape. But I'm excited for it. And the most important thing is that we learn how to adjust and use it to our advantage, I think, and not be scared of the changes.
Yeah. See, okay, so this is another thing. And yeah, Vince, I want to hear from you as well. But people don't naturally like change. And if the rate of change is so much more than how we can adjust to it, that can be overwhelming and stressful. And I think that is probably the source of most people's concern with AI, right? Because it's unknown and people like just being in control. So that's going to be really interesting. Even like for me, like I already feel like a dinosaur trying to catch up with all the stuff. Like just, and I'm already in the industry. Like, so just think of like our parents or like just the average Joe. How are they going to adjust? And they have no choice, right? Like, you know, the early adoption curve, like now it's just pushed like way ahead. So is it going to add more stress or yeah, that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah,
But yeah, Vince, what do you think?
I was just on the last thing. I think I tend to be for the innovation, but I do realize, you know, that I speak with a lot of people, like more than the average Joe who don't know about technology, even people who are in technology, but not technologists in a way, right? They're close to it, but they're not in it.
Mm-hmm.
And well, there's a challenge, you know, like for sure. I do think innovation is, you know, exponential. And our capability to change isn't, or to adapt to change isn't. So either you are or you're not. And also the speed at which we're going to have to adapt to change is, you know, 10x every single 10 years or every single 5 years. So how much can you really adapt to it? You know, even devs today, like, you would be surprised the amount of devs that will go and use GPT or ChatGPT and be like, oh, this isn't good enough. And they're on the side, they're like devs that I know that work in very big companies, and I think they barely write 10% of code nowadays. They debug, they critical think. So I think this is interesting. I don't have the answer to this, because also, like, I think economists should come up with something to also. But 100% AI is going to remove jobs, but I think it's a whole governmental, and how do we reinsert people into these jobs? And I love what Filip said, because I always believe that for robots as well. Well, everything is going to be robots, so you're not going to be needing a cashier anymore. Well, but there's still someone who's going to have to manage and like fix the cashier automatic machine. But then the level of the population, I wouldn't say IQ, although it has been proven that IQ goes with time above as a population, but I would say it's skills, and art skills, like you would, you know, there would be more engineers.
Mm-hmm.
But to be an engineer, you need to have a lot of years of study. So it's quite also like that question of how does that work? Because access to education globally, reformations for retraining for people, I think there's a lot of challenges here that are bigger than just technology. But if we just talked about technology and remove this whole part, I would say there's no limit. Because if you think about this and we go sci-fi, and it's also like, I'm not creative enough for this, but you already have drones delivering. Then you have AI that can create the whole artistic thing, which we never expected to do. You have also like images, you know, through diffusion models. If we combine all of these things and just accept that these robots are going to be in our lives, so we accept the change, like there's no limit. Like if you think about it, it's like, oh, I just want to send a picture, print it out to my friend. I can just be like, open the window, give it, you know, like there's no limit. And all I have to say is to my phone, hey Siri, I want to send, you know, a picture to my friend, or I want to send this gift. Can you come and pick it up? Like there's no limit. Just accepting it within society is what's going to limit it, I think, which is good to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say those who have more of an open mind to receive new things, they're going to be okay. But those, again, who are resistant to change, it's going to be a tough time.
It's going to be a tough time. That's true.
And sometimes so a question back to you, Josh, on that one, and actually Filip as well. Do you think that sometimes we're maybe in our little bubble of tech And actually, all of this is just within, metropolitan cities or because we're digital. But what about rural people living in rural areas? What about like how do we think, is it really going to change them for the next 30 years?
The people in the rural areas?
Rural areas, like, or people who are not really directly affected, because I think we're such in a bubble. Maybe we're thinking something here, and actually the reality is we're not going to affect them because they don't have internet. I'm exaggerating, but I'm saying, like, yeah. Do you think we also, that bubble that we're in makes us think in ways that probably wouldn't actually happen?
I don't know. I feel like the trend, though, if you just go by statistics, more and more people are moving towards cities or even getting connected, whether it's the internet and things like that. And again, like, we are social creatures. So if you look at, just like, what is it, like Metcalfe's law, which is all about like nodes and networks and stuff. And we are being more and more connected and plugged into a network. And so I think we almost can't avoid it. I think the trend is everyone's like getting infected by the technology bug, right? That's spreading around. Unless you purposely are going out in the middle of nowhere and hiding under a rock. But yeah, I would say that's kind of the default trend. That's my take.
Yeah, there's always going to be people who will remain rural, and that's the kind of life that they like. But I think most people these days, they chase opportunity, and the web, the internet, and the jobs associated with that, bring opportunity. So people will follow that. So we're definitely going to see more people follow that as well. And going back to one of the previous points you said, I think with software engineering, we're going to start not to see many full stack engineers anymore, because every single part of a chunk of engineering is getting extremely, extremely complex. So we're going to see a lot of specialists in a very niche area. Hence, later on, when you come to no-code tools will be the platform that will allow people to be a specialist in many parts.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing this as well already in local tools, where you would hire a Webflow front end or Bubble front end, and you would have separate ones for more advanced API backend workflows, and optimization of speed. And yeah,
I kind of see that as there's a developer, there's the designer, and then the no code are just like new segments or verticals of new jobs, but they're almost like bridge industries where they're bridging in between, say like design or no code thinking to full on code. But with the layer of AI, don't you think that kind of covers most of it? Again, if you just like ask it to prompt and it's so advanced, it kind of does all the calculations, the executions, like the end game of AI would almost replace those jobs? Or would it be a specialty as well?
I think also, like, generative AI is still limited. I think within that there will be specialization, but I also think it's just started not even that long, and you already have complex. You already have three different major prompts to ChatGPT or GPT-3, Claude, and you have open source ones. So the question is also, do we think AI is just going to be using these existing model or creating your own models? And that's becoming then more complex. It's like, I'm going to create my own model for my specific business. That's an ML engineers. So I think the financial models are much more accessible, much better, which means we can create more complex, more problem solving specific use cases, which still needs specialization and complexity and devs to an extent. Filip.
I'm just going to say that I think you've covered that well. I have nothing to add.
I mean, I'm glad that we're talking about the accessibility, right? Because we're getting a lot of questions in chat right now.
Yeah.
And it might be a good time to transition because I think these questions are still pretty relevant to what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I'm seeing there's a question from Elisa. She's asking, do you think no-code tools will lower the barrier for creative industries or gradually raise the bar for them?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, 100%.
I think
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think it's going to be both. Yes, they're going to be somewhat lowering the barrier because more people will have access to it. But then again, the things you can or will be able to do with no code will kind of depend on the skill as well in some way or another. Your creativity, how much experience you have, the things you think that you can create. So it's kind of both, honestly. If you have more to add on top of that, Josh, I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, no, I was just saying like it does lower the barrier because if it wasn't for no code, I wouldn't be in this space.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're also getting questions about how kind of sort of the flip side of that, because I've got a question from Peng Ray as well as let's see, King Taikos. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. But Peng Ray's asking, how do you think pro code and no code should be combined in the future? While King here is wondering, what if there are websites built by no code or AI, but then there are bugs? How can we debug within that? And I think these kind of tie together.
I can speak to this real quick. So with Reloom, what they've done is take AI and use like a prompt UI to basically build like a sitemap generator. And then in the future we're imagining you typing like, here's my company, it's a bike company, and so it'll generate the whole wireframe. And I think right now, again, just like the current application, AI and all these no-code tools should just take you from like 0 to 80. And I think the main benefit is just the time save, right? Again, the speed of execution. That's really like the 10x benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And then from 80 to 100, that's when you tweak it and do that. And I think, right now that's like everyone's finding what's the what'll take you to 0 to 80 in like, minutes. And then from there, you can customize it.
Speaking about bugs, I actually don't think that will be the case. I mean, I know right now, obviously, because for example, the AI models, they're like ChatGPT 4 or something, they're still, they still are learning, right? So occasionally you do get bugs, but at that point, I expect AI to be recursive. And I'd expect it to generate the code and then ask itself, does this code actually work? And then go through it again. And I very often actually use AI to paste if I get an error or something that I can't figure out specifically what it is, I'll take the code snippet, I'll paste it in, and I'll ask ChatGPT, what is the error in this? How can this be done better? And it actually gives me the reply. And many of the times it actually fixes the problem for me without me having to research it on Stack Overflow or Google or wherever. So I think at one point AI will become recursive, but that's a whole another world of AI that I don't want to dig a hole into.
Yeah, actually, a friend of mine, he built some platform where it's basically testing prompts or prompts and generating, but together with the output for developer. So kind of what you're asking, King Cops. And one of the things in there was actually adding code, right? What makes sense is you do all of these things AI, then you double check whether it's actually a code that is working, which there are things with code you can do, or, is the expected output including, so like there's regex, there's different JavaScript you can run on top. So like AI is just the start, and then there are exactly recursive solutions to like figure out whether this is working with the expected output.
Yeah, awesome. And I am really sorry, but this might have to be our last question, but it might be a good way to wrap up this discussion because Martin from Ghana, hello, is asking, sort of what are the best tools and resources for a newbie like me? I'm assuming in the no code space. And I actually do want to preface this with saying it's my good old plug here, but every single one of our panelists here have amazing content. They're mentors, they're educators, and they're really active on their platforms. And so right here is an amazing resource for you. So we've actually dropped a link in the chat to make sure you can find everyone on Twitter at least. But yeah, I'll open up this question to y'all. What resources, what do you have to recommend to people who are newer to the space?
I'm going to do a quick plug. You can guys go to nocodefamily.com. We list hundreds of tools using no code. And I think the idea is really getting in there, finding the tools you want. So by, category, I'm wanting to build an app. And then we have AI as well that tells you what that tool specifically can help you do or not help you do. Other than that, I would say, I think the best place for anybody to start is having a project. Project, side hustle, product they want to build within their company, right? Do it the rule the Google does it. It's like 20% of your time if you manage to get of your work to do just like the side project or something. And then you use no-code tools like, okay, now I need this, now I need this. Because you're learning based on an output and a goal every single time rather than, oh, there's so much out there, you're going to get lost. But if you have a very focused, and it can be, I'll say this, it can be, I want to do a gift of all my recipes to my family. And I just want to create a little app for them for Christmas. That could be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be, oh, I have to build a product I'm going to sell. And that is enough because you're having to figure out database and app and all that kind of stuff.
I'm gonna say the best resources, instead of just telling you a specific tool, I'm just gonna go and recommend tap into the community. So whether it's the Dora community or any design, if it's a Figma community, because it's really the people that you interact with and will teach you the specific things that you need, as opposed to even looking at like videos help, but I think like there's no better teaching and growing experience than interacting with a live person. And maybe it's going to be an AI in the future, who knows. So yeah, maybe chat GPT. But I always, for me, I'm always a social learner, so that's what I would recommend. So like hit people up on Twitter. Yeah, I think that's probably what made the biggest difference for me.
I definitely agree with Josh. I'm big on community and I love chatting to people. So I think a recommendation specifically for what you should use should come from what you want to build. So you're more than welcome to just hit me up on Twitter, send me a message, and I'll give you a reply with a suggestion.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I've dropped the link for Vince that for the no code family. And if y'all have anything else, I can drop it into the live stream. But that I always have to be the bad guy every time. This marks the end of our Q&A session. And so if you have any questions for our panelists, just feel free to follow our wonderful guests on social media, right? And thank you to both our wonderful guests today and for you, the audience, for attending this Dora Expo event. And we hope to see you at our last event, which is happening like pretty much right after this. So don't forget to sign up via this QR code or just check it out. You should be able to see the video on our YouTube channel, Dora Tool, right here. So yeah, thank you guys so much for this amazing discussion.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Guys. Very cool, yeah.
Yeah, thanks guys for hosting us, and you, Josh.